Making Star Wars Show. Making Star Wars Show. Making Star Wars Show. Making Star Wars Show.
It's not about spaceships.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Moore from MakingStarWars.net. And with me, as always, is my buddy Rob, the Sketchcrafter. And below is James. James, is your last name said Krusek?
Very good. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, I got it right. I couldn't believe it. Okay, yeah, and James has had an interesting history with Star Wars, and he knows a lot of esoteric kind of things that I find that stuff all fascinating. Like honestly, yeah, I know you were kind of like downplaying it and joking around about it like before we started right now, but I mean, I'm the kind of nerd where I'm like, so that's why that is, or that was the rule, you know.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating.
Awesome. Yeah, I was kind of like the kid from Almost Famous, except instead of Billy Crudup and Jason Lee, it was more like Tim Zahn and Aaron Alston. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, Before we go on with like the news of the day, like, can you do you mind talking a little bit about what you told me and when we talked through email about kind of like how you kind of got into like the West End Games like little fold, if you will, or whatever. Like it was kind of fascinating. It kind of did have when you were talking about how you were going to conventions and all of those guys were there and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, Gen Con was up in Milwaukee. I'm in Chicago, and so that was just a short drive up the road. And so I went there every year for starting from like age 15 on up. So the West End guys would be there, and the one year I went up there, and I was like, so what does it take to write for you guys? And I think it was Bill Smith, one of the editors at the time. He's like, oh, you want to write for us? Here's my card. Send me a proposal. And I was like, okay. So I ended up submitting a bunch of stuff to them over the years. Unfortunately, many things were lost due to any number of, this book was canceled. Lucasfilm said no, any number of different reasons as to why. I got my name in a couple of books, so I had a cup of coffee with them, and I had some cool stories from that certainly. And they were, and I haven't talked to those guys in years. And I'd love to, because as a 16-year-old kid, getting like the inside scoop and being part of that, that whole like scene was just amazing. And so I owe those guys a lot because some awesome memories from that time. But yeah, they were just real open and hey, call us up if you need anything. And sometimes I just call them up and be like, hey, what do you think about X? And we'd just be sitting there and talk Star Wars all day with the guys at West End. And they were real cool with that. And of course, back in the day, in the early years of Gen Con, and just in Lucasfilm in general, you didn't have a story group there.
Right.
So it was Lucy Autry Wilson would have been there, Sue Stroni, Howard Rothman. Those are pretty much your story group, and those are the ones that were looking over your stuff and giving you the green light. So then Pablo Hidalgo, of course, started the same way. He was a freelancer for West End, and he would be at Gen Con on the regular too. Mm-hmm. And so there was actually one time I remember I was up there and they're just sitting around and we're just watching this like miniatures event that they had going on. Somebody had built a to scale Star Destroyer for the Micro Machines, like X-Wings and TIE Fighters. And so someone literally, it's like, okay, you get a squadron of X-Wings, you get a squadron of Y-Wings, you get a Star Destroyer. So like when this guy's turn was up, it had like 5 people come out to like move his piece across the board. It was hilarious. And and I'm sitting there watching this. It was myself, Bill Smith from West End, Tim Zahn was there, and Pablo Hidalgo. And we were all just kind of sitting around and chatting about all things Star Wars at the time. And of course, this is, before the prequels and even before the special editions, a lot of times we were having these conversations. So yeah, I got a lot of inside baseball stuff from that. But then, aside from the West End stuff over the years, I've gotten the opportunity to talk with Ralph McQuarrie, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, a whole host of different people kind of across the board at Star Wars. And so, it's kind of cool. And like thinking about coming on the show and talking about these stories. I'm like, man, I got some cool stuff. I'm like, it's been a pretty awesome life. I didn't really think about it until now. It's like, yeah, man. So I got very lucky and very fortunate to kind of be kind of in the inside of a lot of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were like so you were 16 when you were like, I want to write for you, and they were like, oh, you want to write for us? Here's my card. You were
Yeah,
that young?
seriously.
That's
Yeah, it was that-
amazing.
right. It was
That's
kind of there,
that's
so
that's like insane in a way, because you always think like, oh, how do I get in there? What do I do? What kind of, and you just, it's that simple.
That isn't uncommon
ask.
though at the time, because at this round 95, 96, Icons took over the lightsaber, the official lightsaber production for replicas and all stuff for Lucasfilm. And so they went to Comic-Con that year and were going to all the guys selling their own replicas, looking at the good ones and giving them offers, and the other ones shutting them down from selling replicas. And my buddy and I had made our own replicas, and we were 15, 16, and he was like, I'd love to work for you guys. I'm like, great, here's our card. I mean, like they you had talent. They weren't like against that option at the time. It was weird. Yeah.
do you still know them? Because they owe me money from a Han Solo blaster they never delivered on.
No, I was the guy. I was like, I could draw one. They're like, no, you have to physically build this stuff. So,
Dude, yeah, not to name any names of companies or anything like that, but I always hear about those kinds of companies, like who work in the industry, and boy, do they have pyramid scheme vibes to them. Like, if we don't get 17,000 orders of this, we can't ship the other orders, and then it's all going to collapse. And you're like, whoa, I'm not buying any of this stuff. So whenever anybody asks me, should I do it? I'm just like, I don't think so. I don't know. If you want it next year, maybe.
Although, James, if any company ever owes you money, LinkedIn is a fun resource for finding people who have previously. I have tracked down a few miscellaneous dollars just by some friendly LinkedIn tags.
Just pull a Jay and Silent Bob and just go door to door with the list.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, before we forget, we should probably hit on what happened on Friday. It was kind of funny on Friday Friday and Saturday, the news broke that Hayden Christensen is going to be in Star Wars Ahsoka. And not to try to piggyback onto that scoop that if they had, that big one from Boris Kit, I think it was.
It's a Hollywood Reporter.
Is that he's in Ahsoka, and like I said, not to piggyback on it, but it's funny that that one hit when it did, because like I just talked about how Hera is being cast and the Ghost is being built from Star Wars Rebels for that production, and it was like about to really start going into full steam and like to get going, and it's going to film until late next year was what I heard. So when you have that. And then you have the Boris Kit thing with Anakin. To me, it sounds like, oh, they didn't want the big one to leak out through the idiots like me, and they gave it to the big guys who they could get some clout with, and in doing so, in a weird way, I feel like it kind of proves what I was talking about for what that's worth. I know that's really roundabout, but that is how this usually kind of goes. And so Anakin, do you guys think he's gonna? Based on the fact that Ahsoka takes place after Star Wars Return of the Jedi, I think that's an indication of a flashback, wouldn't you guys say?
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah. That'd be interesting, though, because obviously, they'd have to de-age the characters tremendously. You go back far enough, I mean, Rosario Dawson's a bit tall to play a 14-year-old. So, yeah, be interesting.
But when you
just
look
do
at
force perspective, so it'd be like a tiny grown woman, like
like a hobbit, yeah.
and they'll get the Instagram filter on Hayden, so he'll look all anime-ish, right, clean and young, and he'll have big eyes.
He still looks pretty good though. Like I could see them de-aging him very easily. In fact, I wish I had it for the show because I didn't think about it, but some fans were taking the Harrison Ford footage in Italy from last week on the set of Indiana Jones. We're de-aging him like perfectly, like better than what we're seeing in on screen. And I'm like, wow. So I'm like, if this is a 3-minute scene in Star Wars Ahsoka, I don't think they're gonna have any problem doing it for them.
It's possible.
We know possible it's Force Dawson. Yeah, and that's what I was gonna throw up is Johannes is like. Force Ghost Anakin or flashback?
Well, because he's Anakin Force Ghost at the end of Jedi now, right?
Yeah.
Like canonically speaking, it's young Anakin, so it is possible that
And he's in a comic book now as a ghost, looking really, really drawn, kind of cartoony, honestly. In a
he's
bad
got
way.
good publicity.
Yeah,
He's got a good agent. Force Ghost Anakin's got representation.
but my cynical brain went right to this. Everyone wants a Clone Wars flashback in Star Wars Kenobi. That's not probably happening. So what they're doing is they're getting out in front of that by letting us know he's going to be in Ahsoka, which lets us chase that further and not be mad at Kenobi when it comes out and it's not there. Right? I mean, it makes sense because otherwise this would be a big secret to like keep unless it was strategically in their best interest to have it out. And of all of the things I'm hearing about Star Wars Ahsoka, the fact that Hayden Christensen is the one that if they decided if this was a calculated thing decided to put out is kind of strange to me. Especially since we already know he's in Kenobi, like we're already getting Hayden back. So it's like, but this is also still that time when if you tell us he's coming back and he hasn't actually come back, they're kind of getting a twofer on it in a way. Does that make sense? Because after Star Wars Kenobi comes out, and they're like Hayden Christensen's in it. You're gonna be like, yeah, we just saw him last week. That's cool.
I think it's just funny how they, obviously when Disney first took over, they avoided the prequels like the plague. And now this is like a big scoop, like, hey, Hayden Christensen. So, I mean, we've like come completely full circle with this stuff, it seems like.
Maloney does it again.
Yeah.
Put my little prequel magic on it.
Presto.
A bait, prequel bay.
When having been one of those like 90s kids like me, I think we're probably like around the same age. When the prequels came out, I was completely on board, and half of my friends were completely into it. The other half were like, "What is this? Which kid were you?"
Well, I appreciate the fact that you think we're the same age. So
okay,
for that compliment. But I was one of those weird kids because I think the Phantom Menace is unappreciated genius. Quite frankly,
yeah.
Not that and people are like, "Well, what about this? What they acting?" And I completely agree with all the criticisms. Yeah. But I still love that movie. And actually, I kind of compared. I know Rob talks a lot about it, like Cloud Atlas, which is I put that kind of in the same genre, and that I don't think Cloud Atlas is like a masterpiece of a movie, but it's super ambitious. It took a lot of risks for a movie, and if you ever read Roger Ebert's review of Phantom Menace, I kind of go with that kind of philosophy. He basically said that if this had been the first Star Wars movie that you had ever seen, and no one had ever heard of an IP called Star Wars in 1999, and this movie dropped, people would have lost their minds. And I think that's absolutely true. And I'm always of the impression, I'm a weird Star Wars fan. I'm not an EU fan at all. I grew up with the original trilogy. I love the prequels. I actually have the mind that the EU, in a lot of ways, is why the prequels got such a backlash. Because I think if you go from Heir to the Empire to the prequels, it's a bigger leap to take that than go from, say, the original trilogy to the prequels. And with all these people reading all these books and comics and getting used to that being Star Wars, and then George going back to, switching it up on people, I think that's where a lot of people lost their minds with the prequels.
Well, even seems to be true in the current era of Star Wars, where the expanded universe was sort of thrown out and said, they said, hey, you could still love it. But when they did that, you had a large group of people taking out large billboards and throwing large fits about it, and then
why can't I save up for retirement? Because you spent all your money on billboards, you freaking idiot! Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would.
All right, okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna get to it because I don't think it's fair because May can't stay up all night. So we're gonna jump back to the Anakin thing probably. But Meg says Snoke and Andor. So one thing that I heard from sources on Star Wars Andor is that Andy Serkis was there for multiple days. and he was doing
drunk.
Yeah, where am I? But,
pretending he's still Claw from the MCU. Arr, I'm the
yeah. But I am
sleeve column.
Well, I am like on the fence about running. I wrote up a story about it, and I decided not to run the story because I'm like, I can't get any more on it. Right now, so far, I haven't got any more on it, and I figured I'd put it out. Maybe Star Wars can finish what I began. And but we end up with this like thing where I think he might have been filming Batman there too, right? The Batman, I think, was filming over at Pinewood for a time. And I don't want to overstate what I know. So I'm trying in the air of just trying to be as honest as I can be. I know that Andy Serkis was there a lot. I have seen photos of crew members with Andy Serkis and things like that. So yeah, but it's worth just putting out there into the universe and seeing what comes back and ask the question, because if you don't ask the question, you can't get the answer. So the question is Andy Serkis actually in Star Wars or not? And just worth putting out there, because if it's Snoke, like that could have interesting. I mean, would it if he was? If he
Ahmed
was,
Best is thumbs downing the video as motherfucker just can't get a fucking break. Fucking columns and everything.
Yeah. No, but
if Andy Serkis is cast as Mr. Fantastic, then Ahmed Best will kill him. Like,
no,
it will happen. You lose it. That's it.
No, but I mean, because I thought about what could it mean. And number one, it might not mean anything. So I'm just trying to be super clear. It might just be that he visited. People visit all the time. In 1919? In 2016, 2017, I almost ran that Natalie Portman was in The Last Jedi. And it turned out that other movie she was making with Oscar Isaac was filming
Is that Arrival?
at Pinewood, Arrival, I think, and was rented out some stage that wasn't being used by Star Wars at the time, and there was all kinds of intermingling, and they didn't know if it was a trick. People who worked on the movie didn't know if it was a trick. They're like, I don't think she's in it, but this could be a trick. You know what I mean? They might be doing this in secret. I don't know. And I was almost going to run it like 4 or 5 times, and I thought, you know what? That's a big one to get wrong. I'm not going to do it. And then thankfully I didn't run it. And another one I got wrong was Jamie Lee Curtis in Mando season 2. But I wasn't bullshit. It wasn't wrong. It was that the role fell through because Halloween ended up coming and taking over, and she couldn't do the role now because things changed for Halloween. That one that just came out, I think. And but I still expect her probably to show up in The Mandalorian at some point, or in one of these shows, playing the role she was intended to play. Because they changed the role, I think, to preserve it for her. That's my reading of it. And the woman, what's her name? Meg knows her name, and I always forget it. The one that Ahsoka fights in The Mandalorian season 2, and they don't show her die. I think they don't show her death because Jamie Lee Curtis. If Jamie Lee Curtis comes in, she died there. If she didn't die there, then she goes on, and Morgan Elsbeth, thank you, Meg. Morgan will go on and be like, oh, now I got robot guts, like, Homegirl. So they'll just do something like that probably. But all of this stuff is,
she's just got hot robot legs, and she does that scene from True Lies, but with the robot legs. That's how she gets revealed. But bam,
yeah,
but bam, right? And the T1000, the T800, because they own it now, can be in there, and it could be like, whoa, I was now attracted to Android lady.
Yeah. And then Mig's all, by the way, just to watch out, some weirdos from Reddit lurk. Oh, yes, they do. They always
right behind you, Jason. Watch out.
Yeah, it's been Rob the whole time. I know it. I know it. Yeah, but
I'm like Section 31. Ooh.
But it's fascinating in the sense that if Andy Serkis is playing Snoke, I think Occam's Razor would tell me he's just playing a new guy. A new character. He is a good actor. He's in the area. They could use him just for anything in a spy thriller. It makes complete sense. On the other side, if it's Snoke, what if he's the guy that Snoke is based on? What if he's playing who Palpatine uses to make the Snoke clone? The idea of I'm going to kill this guy and take his blood.
Which Snoke story are they going with? The Force Awakens novelization Snoke, the Rise of Skywalker Snoke. I mean, it seems like the backstory on that character has changed about 5 times.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that's why I don't care what the official stories are. If this pans out,
Yeah.
if this ends up being anything, like as Nolan says, like Proto Snoke is a possibility. but also
It's such a G.I. Joe name, it works, right?
Yeah.
It's Proto Snoke, right? Like,
I am Proto
it's the
Snoke.
It appears in the animated film, and you get the backstory about how the Snoke was made, and yeah, now you get Snork Pentor after this. Like,
Snokes are actually like Smurfs. So you get jokey Snoke.
yeah,
they're
everything's
like
very
Snorks.
Snokish to them.
They're
Yeah,
like the Snorks. Remember those guys, that underwater
There you go.
cartoon
Yeah,
Snorks?
there you go. Yeah.
yeah, Snorks. Okay, Jason. Now we
There's a
know what to
parody.
put into the AI machine. Snorks,
Yeah,
right?
Snorks.
Snorks. They have to crop their fins off to commit, to commit to the Empire.
Yeah,
right?
it's weird that they had their genitalia on top of their head. I don't know why they allowed that. But
it's actually their asshole. Like people don't know that's how Snokes fart and it pushes them if they move that way.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And then Palpatine takes that, and that's how they create size noodles. Just
There's
failed.
no way they put Snoke in Andor. It doesn't even make any sense.
Well-
I would be more inclined to think that if he's on it, he might be directing or looking to direct a series, because
He's not directing. I would know if he was directing.
no, but
He
if
would
I'm
do
saying
that.
looking to in the
Oh,
future,
yeah.
I said he's more
Sure.
likely planning something where he would direct,
Yeah.
a Star Wars series or something. Because
And they are making a volume that you mentioned at Pinewood, right?
yeah, well, they built it. They used stagecraft on Batman.
Mm-hmm.
That's the interesting connection there. Is they built a stagecraft set and they used some of that on the Batman, probably for reshoots and stuff. But they're building a full set, for more ILM projects. I mean, that was an actual article I read not too long ago. So yeah.
But I mean, Andor has to have some kind of MacGuffin information, if you will.
What if his name is Mac Guffin?
MacGuffin, yeah.
Right.
But I mean,
That's
it has to have like something that matters. It can't just be I want to know how they make stormtrooper blasters. We need that intel for the Rebel Alliance. That would be so anticlimactic for the overall like arc of that series.
Yeah.
So
James is like, I got the West End's book that explains where they got it. They don't know what serious about this. West End's already covered this. Like, they made a whole campaign module out of this fucking shit.
I'll say, West End was really good about kind of toning everything down. So you would send in some stuff, and because the one time I sent in something that was pretty ambitious, and they're like, no, this is too big. So they didn't want, but the EU went the opposite direction. It's like, hey, let's have a new super weapon every other novel, and so hopefully the new Disney TV shows don't go that same route, and everything has to be bigger, more fantastic, and everything has to be the galaxies in peril, and it can't just be just a basic story about a dude. So yeah, I mean, I hope it's not. They don't feel like they have to amp it up every time they do something.
Yeah, no. You definitely especially when it comes to publishing comics and things like that. Like just the ability to tell a good fun story that isn't life changing for the whole universe every time, and then doesn't matter the next comic or the next book.
Right.
It puts them into a weird place. But I do feel like the television shows they have to make a contribution though to the overall lore. Why does this need to exist?
Yeah, and I'm not one of the. It seems like with Bad Batch and even Mando season 2. I mean, I like the Mandalorian. Get me wrong, but it's all about the Easter eggs and the cameos, and it needs to be, especially with the Mandalorian. When you have a show called The Mandalorian, and all everybody talks about is Bo-Katan, Ahsoka Tano, and Luke Skywalker, that's a problem. So it's they seem to have a difficult time kind of breaking out and doing their own thing without having to resort back to bringing something in that, but here's this guy that you like, to kind of
I would say though,
I
would say though, James, that's more of a product of fandom, because my normal friends, when I go to the barbershop and they're normal people, they're talking about Mando's, when Baby Yoda has the little knob. They're talking about the Eye Spider episodes. They're talking about when the Prison Break So the fans are talking about Easter eggs, but the average viewer who's a fan of, right?
Yeah.
The average fan, the regular fans, they're not so much about that. The Luke Skywalker thing everyone mentions because how can you not? I mean,
Sure.
but the episodes they're bringing up to me are not. They're not talking about Bo-Katan. I can assure you that. You know, my wife isn't like, "Okay, I love that." They don't even know what
Right.
that is. So
But
Right.
yeah,
No,
but
I watched
there's
with my
a-
girlfriend, and she doesn't know who Bo-Katan is, so I had to explain. She's like, "Who the hell is this person?" So then I'm there, like, giving the backstory on that. But yeah, I mean, I don't need everything to be interconnected. I'm okay with just getting just a one-off story that's a good story, and I don't need to be like, "Well, how does this fit into the big picture thing?" And just tell me a good story.
yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned about the comic books and stuff having to like kind of amp up it because when I worked with West End, one of the things they brought up is back when Heir of the Empire and Dark Empire were kind of getting going. The idea of bringing the Emperor back. Well, first idea was bringing Darth Vader back,
Mhm.
and that was shot down by Lucasfilm. But their pitch for bringing the Emperor back or doing something that scale was this is a comic book, and we can't do something like the novels do. We have to do something bigger, larger than life, more fantastical. And so that was their pitch to Lucasfilm to say, hey, let us do this crazy Dark Empire story. And I guess that's kind of ultimately what kind of sold them on that idea of doing that.
Yeah, I was God, how old was I? I was probably like 8 or something when that came out. I remember like going to a comic book store to buy Batman comics, and the first Dark Empire was there.
Mhm.
And I bought it, and I was like, "What is this?" And then I bothered them like every day after that for issue 2. Got issue 2, but issue 2 like barely shipped. Like it was like one per store or something like that. I remember selling issue 2 for a lot of money as a teenager years later, but it confused my little brain because I read Heir to the Empire. It's probably like the first I don't like not really an adult book. That sounds weird, but but it was like the first grown up book I read.
Right.
That wasn't like Beverly Cleary or some shit. And so I'm like reading that, and then this comic, I'm like, how do these things make sense? These things don't make sense. What is going on? And then I just said, oh well, I'll just take what I like and move on with my life. And I beat about 30,000 guys on Twitter when The Last Jedi came out because I did that at age 8, and they can't do it today.
Well, it's funny how little nobody at that point in time when like Dark Empire and stuff was being done, nobody was thinking about continuity or any of that stuff. Because even like if you talk to Kevin J. Anderson that did the Jedi Academy trilogy, he never was even told that Dark Empire was a thing. And so he turned in
Haunted
his first
Masasi Temple, Kevin J. Anderson.
yeah. Well,
Oh, that one.
yeah. I had some interesting comments when West End was writing the source book for the Jedi Academy trilogy, and their thoughts on that. So, yeah, not a crowning achievement on Lucasfilm Publishing, but yeah, he didn't even know that like Coruscant had been devastated, and so all of a sudden they hand in this comic book. I'm like, because his book takes place in Coruscant. I'm like, oh, it's been turned into a shithole, and he was like, what? So he had to completely rewrite part of his novel like last second to incorporate all this stuff in. But nobody was thinking of those terms. Even Zahn said when he was first approached, he said this will be the official continuation of the saga. These will be the official continuation of the Skywalker story. And so he wrote it and turned it in. And I guess George looked at it and said, well, did anybody tell him I might do a 7, 8, 9? And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get right on there, George. Yeah.
Yeah. You told me not to listen to Kurtz. Now you're saying I got to listen to Kurtz? Kurtz what? I just didn't believe him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and like Meg brings up, so my girlfriend also didn't know who Bo-Katan was. Yeah, and I think that like all of this though speaks to why Star Wars gets so complicated, because it's so many different things to like different people, and where the emphasis goes is so like broad and spread around and spread out. But I do know, and the only thing I do know, like I said, is that a big question that's always asked, like I said, is why does this need to exist? And that more, I think, is when it comes to publishing, it's like, oh, it needs to exist because we promised this amount of books and in that quarter or whatever. And that's what happens. But when it comes to the movies and the live action television shows and stuff like that, they are trying to make contributions to the actual like overall, story like that actually do matter. And I know one of the reasons that they brought Cassian back at first was because people love Diego Luna, especially in Latin America. And like he's there, he's a Star Wars hero for them. And also everybody else liked him too. He's cool. And so it's this opportunity, but I feel like there's more to it, and there's more to Cassian that's going to make it where, because like Cassian's big story that we had so far is essentially the Death Star. That's maybe like the biggest, he's related to the biggest Star Wars story ever when you get down to it, like as a character. If Star Wars history was real, he plays a part in what Luke Skywalker is able to do. And so if we have more stories with him though, and it's just like, I don't know, man, it can't be like, he had needed to seduce Mon Mothma to find out she was a spy. Like that's
it was
kind of
size noodles he had to seduce. That's
I have never been with a snork before, is what he says to her because of her mouth.
You have bee stung lips.
But yeah, it ends up so anyways, we have the Mandalorian introducing these ideas though about like cloning. Will that go anywhere? I mean, because they make it appear like Grogu is needed because of the Palpatine Resurrection Project.
Yeah.
But Palpatine was already looking like a dried out ball sack by Return of the Jedi, right? So if we're around this time, they're probably like, he had to have been thinking, I'm gonna need something new going on. I'm gonna need some transplants. So are they gonna do a story like that? I don't know. I'm not gonna die on a hill saying that if they are, but whatever's going on in the television shows, I feel like we're going to have a lot of overlap in the plot threads, because the people, there's millions of people watching the Mandalorian, and we hope we'll watch Boba Fett, and Boba Fett has Mandalorian story plots going through it, and Cassian would make sense to some degree, but like I said, I don't even know if Andy Serkis is in it.
Well,
he might
that or his big
walking...
gimmick. There's big gimmick is they just have Cassian doing some wild stunt off the back of something, just to get every episode. So like sometimes he's riding a Rancor, sometimes he's hanging off the back of a speeder bike, right? But they do it in real life, like they really drive really fast, drag him on the highway, and that's the whole point.
What was just I just had a real title based Return of the Jedi moment based off of what James said a few minutes ago. I was thinking about the scoop I had last week about how there's like, 75 Mandalorians in this next one. And the show is called The Mandalorian. When the show starts, what if we think it's The Mandalorian, Din Djarin, but by the end of it, we're like, oh no, it's all of them.
Oh, so Mandalorian's now plural. They don't need the S, because I was hoping we would just spray paint the S at the end.
Mandalorian.
No,
a Z.
Man, they spray
A
paint.
red Z.
I was told they tag. I specifically had to put that shit on a shirt once. So.
Yeah. Sabine Wren, Mandalorian the Z.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how it continues. This ain't your dad's Star Wars Mandalorian.
They all wear fedoras.
Oh yeah. I was gonna tell you about a story about fedoras that happened right after our conversation.
Fedora Lorian.
It was tempting to wear it today,
Okay,
you gotta wear the scarf.
For the record, I just got a message from a source. Publish your article. He is in Andor. So. Sounds like he is in Andor.
But he's such a chameleon, though. I mean, it's hard to say what he would play. I mean, Anthony Daniels was in Attack of the Clones, but
Ahmed Best was
not
don't forget Jar Jar, my friend. Like, the captain, whatever his name was. I had the action figure.
Ahmed Best.
Yeah.
Ahmed Best, man. I know my Ahmed Best.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's what I like. I feel like the Occam's razor is that he's just a new character because he's a talented actor, and he could be a new digital character because he's also a talented digital actor too, for that matter. But is it Snoke? Is it that little freak, that tall freak?
What if he ends up being the worst Alfred though? Like what if we're like, fuck his Alfred? Like this guy is just fucking dumb.
89 Alfred is still the real Alfred. So anybody else is a fake Alfred. So I don't care. You know what I mean? Like Michael Caine, he would have stolen Kim Basinger from Bruce Wayne in like a minute. That guy is dapper as hell. You know,
I don't know. Steve Martin gave him a run in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels around the same time. So.
Yeah, but in Blame It on Rio, he goes out with what's her name? In Blame It on Rio, he goes out with Demi Moore when she's like 13. So it's not a good idea. Yeah, not even kidding. It's like that's
it was a different
movie.
time. It was 1987.
It was probably. We went over to my. Honestly, it was pretty weird. My dad had this friend as a kid who worked at Foot Locker in the corporate. And yeah, he was kind of like the professional Al Bundy in a lot of ways. But he worked in the stores and in the corporate because it was like a small company like before like by the late 80s it had blown up. But he goes to a convention and they give him the first Nintendo. And he brings back the first Nintendo. And he has that thing like a good 3-4 months before it was out here. And they were trying to get everybody to like cover it. They were trying to they were trying to do work with Foot Locker at the time to get they had sports line. All the videos had like a sports thing on it.
If they had the power pad at launch, they would have got that deal.
Right?
You know,
so,
that's the problem. They didn't have it at launch.
Yeah, but he had it. I got to go play the Nintendo back then and all that stuff. But anyways, on that very day that I played the Nintendo for the very first time, his name was Floyd. He had bought a bunch of VHS tapes for like $100 each because it was the 80s and he is crazy. His wife sees Blame It on Rio, declares it porno. And Floyd's like, I don't want to throw this away. I spent like $90 on it. And he gives it to my dad. My dad's like, and back then everybody had a VHS collection. My dad's like, it's going in the VHS collection. So I'm like 8 years old or something like that. And I'm like, this is porno. I gotta check this out. So I'm like sitting there watching Blame It on Rio as a kid, like going like, when's it gonna get good? I'm like fast forwarding.
That's how I weaponize the TV guide. I would go in the back and write nudity, sexual content, check. That's the one I'm watching. That's everything else I ignore. You know, like it wasn't good.
Sorry to cover you, James, but Mr. Lopez says about Luna, I don't know, man. I'm from Argentina, and I couldn't care less that he or Pedro Chile are Latinos. If they're good actors, good on their roles, that's it. If they were from the moon, wouldn't care. And I get that.
The moon of Viego?
And that's ultimately how I feel too. From the moons of Viego, yeah.
But they're angels to me.
They are angels. There are brown, golden god angels. Anyways, no, but at the same time, though, that is why. I mean, I love Donnie Yen in Rogue One, but they did that for infiltration into markets. That's why Disney was doing it. Now, is Disney doing the wrong thing to do that? I don't know. I have no idea. Like if it is, I do, but I am glad that if those actors were used. And I think in the end, we're getting good actors from around the world that we wouldn't see in Star Wars otherwise. So it ultimately probably ends up being a good thing. But he says that he doesn't get representation. I don't get representation. I don't know. I get actors. I guess for actors and people in the business, it's important.
Yeah, but guys, this is okay. I see what they're saying, right? You can take that stance. That's fine. But if you go back to 1977, you're talking. So some of the biggest complaints about Star Wars were from everybody was, why is it filled with just white people? You know, that was a complaint then. So like, I get it. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, like if it's just filled with whoever's available in Van Nuys, you know, like on Thursday, that's not helpful either, because then you're not finding people who actually have better takes. You know, you don't have. I think probably the most wasted potential for me was just when they put Benicio del Toro in the film, and he doesn't have anything of real substance, like he's just got a guy who kind of does another funny accent and has a one bit part, but you got an actor who could bring that's my when you have a fantastic actor and you don't utilize him, when you got Sam Jackson and he's just giving you the Spock eyebrow, for a whole movie, like that's my bigger complaint about Phantom Menace than whether it had a bunch of CGI characters, like utilize the talent you do have. Otherwise, what's the point? So Diego Luna is a great talent. So, hey, utilizing him to bring about a series, if someone has a legit take to do with that character, perfect. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to do, if you did Jyn Erso, then it's just her, my dad left, running around, like that's not much either.
Looking
so
pretty, running around.
Yeah. So seeing a side of the rebellion seeing a side of the rebellion that isn't going to be, it's all about hope every 3 seconds is nice too, because that gets a bit old. Like the rebellion. I like the fact that the rebellion isn't painted as just this perfect go lucky deal. As no group of people who decide to rebel against their government is perfect, right? Like in any form of history, whether it was good or not, it has shady sides. So like that's an interesting take. And
yeah, man, I don't get why
moral.
that guy dressed up like a Viking Chewbacca to represent me on January 6th. Why'd he do that? No kidding.
Yeah, so it's just like you get Benicio and you think like, wow, maybe he'll be like this major Empire character. It's why I get cynical when you say, oh, an actor's on set or could be in the role. What's it going to be? I'm like, probably fucking Joe Idiot in the back selling death sticks. Like, because it may not, they tend to not utilize the big talent for the roles you think they might. And they tend to go with nobodies. I'm not saying like they're nobody, but smaller, lesser known people for bigger roles.
Well, Daisy Ridley was literally a nobody, and then a nobody, and then a Palpatine. So I get what you're saying.
I mean, and then Matt Smith, I don't, but
I still don't get that one. No, that one's still weird.
No, I think they cast too many times off of they get a certain aesthetic that they want, and not necessarily in terms of just the diversity thing, but just in terms of just the kind of aesthetic they want to have for the shoot. They say this person looks good as this character, and as opposed to really kind of going. I mean, and Star Wars, in a lot of ways, is a good example of that. You got Anthony Daniels voicing C-3PO. That was never the intention, but he did the voice, and like, oh, he's pretty good. We should probably go with this guy. And I think so many times they just kind of this looks right on paper, but it's not right. That character Benicio del Toro played, he could have been anybody. It didn't have to be Benicio del Toro to play that.
Yeah,
I almost wonder.
Go ahead.
I almost wonder sometimes too, like, is that intentional? Like they don't want an actor to bring more than the role is sometimes to stand out. Like, what was that movie with Ed Norton where he's like was it Primal Fear? The movie's not that great, but then you got Ed Norton bringing a performance that changes the whole context of the film. And sometimes I wonder if, like in a Star Wars or in a AAA, budget production where they're against a lot of like bringing more to the table than you may have initially planned for. But I think that because every time they get a big actor, you get Liam Neeson really isn't bringing the Rob Roy, like it's a fun stoic role. But like I said, there's very few times when I see, even in the prequels, when Ewan goes like, we could be here for a very long time. Like that is bringing something to that line that doesn't exist on paper. Right. Yeah. So I think for me, the closest I saw in the newer films might've been Lando, right? Like his body language, Donald Glover's like just total, like when he's at the table and he's at the car and he's bringing something that isn't in the script, that isn't, and it's not a mimic of what another actor did too. It's not, well, how well can he mimic Billy D. Williams? It's like, no, he's bringing something else.
He's bringing Lando to it, not necessarily Billy D. Williams. So,
I just wonder,
Yeah, well, like when they were casting Qui-Gon Jinn, I remember the casting call for it said they wanted someone that was venerable,
older,
and the bold word was like venerable, and that's like Liam Neeson just kind of like you could just put him in a costume and he has that. And so I think when it comes to Star Wars, a lot of it is just trying to not really earn the fact that the character it comes off as venerable or is played in any specific way, but just the fact that that actor embodies that. And that's kind of, and I think with Saw Gerrera, for instance, we're going to see that kind of go someplace because he's going to show up in all these different things. But then Benicio del Toro, we kind of got him, and that didn't really go very far other than it was a ruse. And it's strange.
Well, and acting, I think, is overrated a bit in Star Wars, just because, I wouldn't call Empire Strikes Back a well-acted movie.
Mm-hmm.
It has its moments, certainly, but on the whole, I don't think, it's some kind of masterpiece in acting. It's not like, it's not No Country for Old Men or something like that, where you look at that, like, my God, this is top to bottom, well-acted movie. Yeah. And I don't watch Star Wars for that, so it doesn't bother me that Natalie Portman is like a wooden block.
Except we live in a different world now than 1980 something. We live in a world now where people say if this is the best thing ever, it should be bringing it on all fronts. That's the difference. Is people expect more of it. If people are saying they expect drama out of a Batman film, Oscar caliber drama out of a Batman and a Joker film, then Star Wars better bring it too.
We need to grow up is the problem.
No, we need to stop growing up. And because when you're little kids, you don't care. It's when you get older, you're like, I need this to grow up with me.
Yeah.
At some point, a bunch of kids are going to grow up and they're going to want Fortnite to be Dark Souls, and it ain't gonna happen.
Listen, I want Ash from Pokemon played by James Spader in his prime, all right? That's what I demand.
Him and Pikachu have a real business-like friendship that it questions your boundaries.
Yeah. I think a lot of what gets criticized is more of a matter of taste, and people don't see it that way. There's certain genres, even like film noir. I mean, noir in general, I think it's a horrible genre that was really just started because it was a cheap way to film stuff way back in the day.
Yeah.
And the fact that they continue that genre on in like Christopher Nolan movies, it's like, why are these people sitting around talking all the time? It's a movie. If you got to explain the plot to me, there's a problem.
Well, speaking of Pokemon, they actually have this. It's funny when we saw that movie. I went to go see the movie, and I'm like, I'm up for this. This will be fun. And they got this girl who shows up who speaks in, hey, how you doing, son? How you doing? Like, she's got this, and I'm a reporter for the Pokemon. And you're just like, what movie am I in? Like, are they all like one person is doing this? Like This isn't like we're in a 30s world where we're all talking in that transatlantic, whoa, how you doing? Like it's like one person who. Her acting coach, is that what you decided to do? So that's where you can stand out too much. Like, tone it. We need to bring it down to like a 2.
Yeah, well,
that's Nick Cage. If Nick Cage is playing the role, then you need to go full on.
When it comes to like Star Wars, if I had to like criticize like the whole thing, like all of the live action films, for instance, in the end, that is like the one thing is that every trilogy has completely different acting, and I don't mean it like as a set. Like I love like Mark Hamill's role as Luke Skywalker. Obviously, it doesn't even need to be said that I do, but I feel like the guy acted for the first time in a way in The Last Jedi, like in certain ways, because like I'm a like it's so badass when he goes, I'm a Jedi like my father before me, but when he says that, if you're not thinking that's a weird thing to say, that's a weird way to put it. And like it's so cool and it works stylized, but like they all have just these completely like different takes on acting. And when I watch all 9 of the Skywalker films in a row, I'm like, this does feel inconsistent, and it's in a way nobody's fault because they were made decades apart at times.
But he brings it all back in 9 with that fantastic hammy. He gives him almost a De Niro. Like, all right.
And it's odd that Mark Hamill's take is kind of more authentic to the character than the Last Jedi version, which is like, what's Mark Hamill's? Yeah.
He's a good company guy. It's a good lesson we should all learn. You know, when they're
Yeah.
paying you the bucks, just play with it. You know, that's how we ended up in the Grogu, right?
Yeah, yeah, and he is, not to like get into too much stuff, but like when he was talking about Last Jedi, he was completely honest.
Yeah.
And it wasn't bad. People would just take the one soundbite and make it sound like what he was saying was bad. He wasn't saying anything bad, but they did get into some. I know for a fact that they got into heated discussions, like heated, like, you need to watch what you say, please, kind of stuff with him. And he was just a little like, about it. And then by the time when they get JJ back and do it, I just feel like he just said, it's not really gonna talk that much. I'm just gonna like leave it alone. And he said a lot less, and what he said was more, I feel like, the company line. And then when he gets to Mandalorian, he can't say anything for a long time, for almost ever. So yeah, it does.
Hey,
yeah.
James, I got a question for you. Like, because Thrawn is very Sherlocky, did Tim Zahn, is he like a big Sherlock guy where he's like, no, this is Jeremy Brett's Sherlock, fuck that Peter Cushing shit, like, or is he like, did he ever take like a hard nerd stance on the Sherlockian stuff? Or
I'm trying to remember what in particular. We had a conversation about Thrawn the one time, and I know it was a couple of real interesting points about Thrawn. One was that he kind of based the whole demise of Thrawn and his defeat off of Sauron in Lord of the Rings, where he basically said, here you have this guy that's got this, all-seeing eye, he's got this unbeatable army, he has all the cards, and the only reason why he loses is because he thinks the ring is with one hobbit when it's with another. So one bad piece of information is all it took for Sauron to lose with everything in his favor. And basically, Thrawn does the same thing. He doesn't know that Leia is Vader's daughter. And had he known that, he would have known not to trust the Noghri on his ship, and that's how he gets assassinated. And so that was his kind of take on Thrawn's demise. He never brought up Sherlock Holmes. I thought one of the real interesting things that he brought up that I think they've really kind of dropped the ball on was that when he first proposed this character to Lucasfilm, one of the big sticking points was, of course, the fact that he was an alien. And they said, we don't know if you can have an alien as an Imperial officer. So we're going to have to bring this up the chain, and we're going to have to ask George about it. And when I was told that George's answer that he came back with was, just because you have not seen any aliens in the Empire doesn't mean there aren't any. And certainly if you were to watch A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, you would think it's a bunch of white dudes and a Wookiee for the rebellion.
Right.
And so, you didn't see any aliens until you saw Akbar and a couple other guys in Return of the Jedi. So I always thought, well, yeah, it would make a whole hell of a lot of sense. Especially, if you had like stormtroopers as clones and you say, okay, you got a clone army, they're all human, makes sense. Doesn't make a ton of sense, I think, to have and like the whole idea, and I get like the Empire is evil, so they're pro-human, they're racist, they're xenophobes. I don't think the Emperor would be that. I don't think he would give a damn. I think he's about power by any means necessary, so I don't think he'd waste time with that kind of stuff. So I always thought it was interesting that that was never kind of picked up on anywhere else. That you had Thrawn and Lucasfilm, no problem whatsoever having this high-ranking alien in the Empire, but that's the last time you really ever saw it.
Yeah. In the like 90s, I do remember it was like almost assumed that was pro-human. Yeah. And then I think we did see it show up a couple of times, that it was like a thing, but then it kind of it went away later on.
In the context of what you see in the movies, it totally makes sense. Like, we're all the aliens in the Empire, but it might just be a matter of they didn't have the budget on the first two movies.
There's a fan edit waiting to be made where they just put the puppets from the cantina and the X-Wings during the Death Star run, and you'll see how fucking ridiculous it looks. Fantastically ridiculous, but if you have that weird big eye thing popping up like this in the cantina, in an X-Wing, like people would have been like, what the fuck are we watching? You know, I want the eye from Jabba's palace to have a more significant role, like in a ship, right? Yeah,
He's big in some markets, and Disney Plus is going to capitalize on it. Don't worry.
Jabba's eye bodyguard, dude. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just curious because I mean, in the he puts a lot of his own words. Zahn puts a lot of his own words in that Heir to the Empire 20th release. You know, he's got like a commentary book edition of Heir to the Empire where he writes notes, right? Like you can kind of get his take on it, obviously filtered through PR. But you know, when Sabath was originally like an Obi-Wan clone, and then they were like, don't fucking do any of that, you know, but you still got a clone. Like you got an idea of what happens if you clone, you know, a Jedi. They don't go well. And I'm like, they don't go any more well than the Sith, which made me wonder, are all Sith like how many Sith clones are there? Are like Sith clone Jedi that just went bad? Like, I don't know, like what is the thing there? I think what was interesting about that series was trying to put answers to things that to this day they don't want to put answers to. You know,
yeah,
like,
well, especially in that time. I mean, it was odd, the approval process through Lucasfilm, and hearing some of the things that they'd have take issue with. There was a scene, and it's been so long since I read the book, but there was a point where like R2 flies the X-wing over to Luke.
Yeah.
And Lucasfilm came back and said, well, who's flying the ship? And he said, well, R2 is. He said, well, you can't have R2 fly an X-wing. I was like, what are you talking about? And also, one of the big ones was Tales of the Jabba's Palace with the
my favorite book.
Yes. And the story in there where Mara is communicating with the Emperor, that was nixed by Lucasfilm. Because they said telepathy is not a power of the Force. So
no dyad for her.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to communicate telepathically. He said, well, what the hell is happening at the end of Empire? Because it looks like Luke and Leia are having some kind of, you know, dialogue between one another at the end of Empire. But he had to basically say that, and it's in there, that, you know, that connection is unique to Mara and the Emperor, and that is not something that any random Force user can do. And I mean, there'd be just weird stuff sometimes that would not get through. You couldn't do this, you could do that, you know. On the artwork front, that Wampa's too big. You know, you gotta scale back your Wampa. Strange stuff. Yeah, so back in the day, man, it was
no white man would have a Wampa that big. You know? It's not realistic.
Yeah,
careful, tone it down. You know.
Yeah, I was always one to push the envelope. I know one adventure where there was involved a weapons cache from the Clone Wars. And they said, nah, you can't talk about that. And what really makes me mad is Donnie Yen's character, Chirrut Emwe.
Yeah.
I had in one of my stories, a blind Force user. Because that was one of the big things in Style Guide. You can't have like Jedi run around. And I was like, well, this guy's like blind and useless and can't really do anything. It wouldn't be a threat to anybody. And they're like, nah, you can't do it. There's no Force users around this era. I'm like, but he's
You didn't
blind.
sell him on Rutger Hauer? Right?
That movie's badass.
You're like, it fucking works.
Right, yeah. I mean, obviously they thought it worked great in Rogue One, so, you know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I signed off all my rights to anything I ever sent them, so can't claim credit. It's such a trope, though. I mean, you know, blind master kind of thing, you know. But yeah, they wouldn't even let you do that.
Yeah. So, I used to have a professor. Whenever we would have new students come on, he'd always be like, what drugs have you done? That's what he'd ask everybody at dinner. And they would get like, what? Because they're like trying to be like all very uptight. It's a good icebreaker. But my version of that is knowing what you've been involved with. What actors have you met?
What actors have I met?
From Star Wars, obviously. I mean, if you met some others that are cool, I'll hear that too. But
yeah. Anthony Daniels is actually the one I have the coolest stories with. And I think we talked a bit in an email about, you know, he gets a bad rep. And I can totally understand why. But Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, Ian McDermott, Tim Rose, I had a blast with Tim Rose. Of course, we also worked on the Muppets, which I'm a big fan of as well. God, and a bunch of like just the the lower, I don't want to say lower tier, but lesser known side character actors from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Dennis Lawson.
Dennis Lawson,
Tiny
greatest
Dennis
guy you'll ever
Lawson.
meet.
Yeah.
The original Micro Machine. That's what we like to call
Man,
him.
why do you hate Dennis Lawson so much?
What?
Every day you want to fight him.
You never know
If I ignored him and pretend he didn't exist, that's the real hate. All right, I'm just bringing him back. You forget, right? You like everyone else in his life, you just forget about Dennis Lawson.
He's actually jacked in real life. He's actually he's rocking a six pack. He's super jacked.
He's gonna fuck you up, Rob.
Well,
Taking you down, man.
I didn't see it coming, man. But yeah.
all right, James. So let's not make it about me. Let's hear some Anthony Daniels stories, because people are gonna be like, we hear you guys stories and you never tell anything. So let's tell us something.
So Anthony Daniels actually met at the same place I met the guys from West End. He was doing an appearance there, and it was actually just he was actually on his way to film Attack of the Clones in Tunisia, like the next day or something when he left there. Yeah, he was a super cool guy. But they had a charity dinner that they put on, so you can have dinner with Anthony Daniels, and I was there and got to have dinner with him, and we had this great conversation. Good guy.
Yeah.
Somebody actually came up to him wanting an autograph and didn't have anything for him to sign. So he stole a salad plate from the restaurant we were at, autographed that, and handed that to her.
Just happened to be in his bag.
Yeah. So someone out there has a salad plate autographed by Anthony Daniels, which is really the coolest story ever.
That's pretty rad.
Yeah, but I like I said, I live in Chicago. It's an hour and a half drive from Milwaukee to Chicago, and so we're talking, and he's like, when where are you staying? They were going out for drinks that night, and at some local place, him and a couple of people he was with there. And I was like, I got to get back to Chicago. And he's like, why aren't you staying out here? If I come back tomorrow, I'm like, well, I couldn't find a hotel. There was a last minute thing. And so unfortunately, I'm driving back and forth. He's like, I'll find you a room to stay in. And so Anthony Daniels hooked me up with somebody that he knew through the convention that I ended up spending the night there with them.
Nice.
Yeah. And I mean, it's super cool. And, then the next, it's funny because you can pick up on certain people's vibes right away. And I kind of understand where he gets a bit of a diva-ish kind of rep.
Yeah.
He's a very particular man. And I can tell like right away, just from spending a couple hours with the guy. I walked in, he was doing a panel the next morning at the convention. And I walked in there, and it's a typical, you go to any con, they have the table set up with the chairs and the microphones and the water and all the normal stuff. And I looked at that, and I told somebody that was working there, I'm like, you're going to have to move these tables and clear the space out. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, he's not going to want to sit behind a table. And I can pick it. He's just that kind of dude. I can pick that up right away. And sure enough, he walked in, and he's like, get rid of these tables. And I'm like, I told you. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we hung out a couple times. He was doing a Trivial Pursuit. He was emceeing a Trivial Pursuit game for Star Wars. And I was just happened to pass him by in the hallway, and he's like, where are you going? And I was like, I had something actually with West End. I was going to go talk with them. And I was like, he's like, oh no, if I'm doing this shit, you're having to come with me. And he grabbed me by the arm and he dragged me with him. So, and then later on, he told me, he's like, he had a booth where he signed autographs in the hall. And he's like, stop by the hall later on. I got something for you. I'm like, all right, cool. And so I went by his booth later on, and he's sitting there signing autographs. And obviously I didn't want to, interrupt. So I'm just sitting there waiting for
It's a salad plate, isn't it? It's a salad plate.
It's a salad plate. No. And what's hilarious is he's sitting there signing these autographs, and there's this line, and then this woman comes walking by with her daughter. And this is back, this was 2001. This woman comes walking by with her daughter. And this little girl that's back when Beanie Babies were a thing. So they had the Beanie Baby C-3PO. This little girl has a Beanie Baby C-3PO. And the mom points at Anthony Daniels and is like, that's C-3PO over there. And this little girl looks up at Anthony Daniels, looks down at her little Beanie Baby, and she looks up at her mom. She's like, no, that's C-3PO over there. Girl looks over at him, no. Anthony Daniels saw this out of the corner of his eye, right? And so he gets up from behind the table, does the little C-3PO walk, and starts doing the voice to this little girl, and her eyes just lit up like crazy.
That's nice.
Yeah, cool thing to see. And then he gave me his pass.
Turns out she was blind. the kid. She hasn't seen any of it.
That would work. That would work because she can hear his voice.
And that's why they won't let you do any blind characters in Star Wars, because it pisses off Anthony Daniels every time.
But he ended up giving me his pass from Celebration 1, and he signed it, and he wrote a nice little saying on the back of his pass and handed it over to me. I can't remember. I'd have to dig it up. I don't know where it's at, but he personalized a little something on there for me, and I feel really bad because I think he's definitely pulled back a lot, and I think unfortunately the fandom is why. And I remember even at C2 in Indianapolis, he was doing a panel, and somebody got up and said something about you don't do a lot for the fans or something, basically just shitting on Anthony Daniels. And this guy was out in C2, he was running the lines outside. He would just walk up and down, meet and greet, doing all this stuff. You don't see him do that anymore. And I think he just got some, a couple of people just kind of ruined it. And so
he doesn't wheel out the fucking taco truck like Robert Rodriguez. What's he supposed to do? I'm trying to figure out.
Right. I know. It's
everyone gets a red arm. Hold out your fucking arms. And you just red arm. What's he supposed to do for the fans?
Right. I know. And there's certain people that you meet and you can tell they're into it. They're into the Star Wars thing. And Anthony Daniels is one of those guys that he is cool with being C-3PO and he likes to be amongst the fans and stuff like that. And there's some of them that you can tell that they're, they are maybe okay with it, but they're not gung-ho about it. They're not big fans. They're just yeah, this is a thing I did. And so
that was weird.
Yeah. So you have to kind of, it's unfortunate because a lot of times you'd see these people with the fans, and sometimes the fans didn't pick up on the vibe that the celebrities are getting off. And
my radio show uncle, the guy who played radio shows for a living, when I say radio show, he wasn't on a radio show. He just won all the shit off radio shows. That's what he did for a living. He was one of those guys who was going to Comic-Con since the late 60s, early 70s, right? To go meet Leonard Nimoy and all these guys. And I want to say it was 79 or 80, somewhere around there. He met David Prowse, and he was like, that guy is fucking angry. He was just he hates everything. So I was just always that's Vader's angry. Did you know he's angry? He's this angry all the time. But I could see why now, right? But he was just he said he was very angry. He's a very angry man.
Yeah. He blocked me on Twitter. That's a weird one. What do you call it? When it comes to Anthony Daniels, all of the things I've ever heard about him have been that he's rad, that he's just a really good guy overall. And the bad things I've ever heard, there's always this caveat. And the caveat is he had some kind of demand for Lucasfilm. And the things I've always heard actually aren't convention based. It has to do with working for Lucasfilm. And it's been he was promised X, Y, and Z to do that job. And then when he gets there, that's not X, Y, and Z isn't there, or it's done completely wrong in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And it's well, if they negotiated and talked about something that he wanted, and that's what he wanted to do this job, and then it's not there, of course he has every right to be annoyed with you. And they find it ridiculous, but it's well, you don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. We don't know what he needs. And
something tells me Lucas's Lucasfilm was not sensitive to people having representation or strong negotiation tactics. Just the fact that they signed Ahmed Best up with no representation, for that kind of role and that kind of placement, and to have just be oh, we'll just call you up, yeah, sure, you'll do it, right? Great. It reminds me of I was doing some research on the Power Rangers show, the original, and I was because I had to rewatch this fucking thing for a project I'm on, and I'm why are the Power Rangers different in the fucking movie? When did that happen? Because I didn't watch this thing. It was my brother's, and it was 3 of them left the show in the second season because they had no representation. It was a non-union show. They were making $600 an episode, and they were we were getting electrocuted and people were getting hurt on set, and this was just, they wouldn't change anything or pay us more. So they left, and so I'm as much as I love Star Wars, I just, every time I hear one of those stories, I'm just that's someone who doesn't care about people's like like making a bad relationship with their agent or their representative, like, well, they're going to be here anyway because we're fucking doing the show, and that'll be that. Like, who cares? Kind
Well,
of thing.
I've got some good stories from Lucasfilm in terms of their negotiations. Not with the actors per se, but I know West End is a perfect example. Because West End, what ultimately was their demise was they were tied with some kind of, it's this weird thing. They had this Italian shoe import business that the owners of West End.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
It was this.
It's a futalaka. It's a futaluca, right? I love Luca. Don't fucking cancel me over that. Sorry.
So apparently the shoe import business was going under. And like I remember the West End guys, they're like holed up like 8 in a room at the conventions because they're like, oh, we can't afford to give you a hotel. By the end, they're paying them in like product.
No.
And it was, I mean, if you saw the numbers for their publishing, and people would have been very envious of the amount of money they're making on role playing games. And with the prequels just getting ready to ramp up, it was a license to print money for them. But this Italian shoe import business sunk them, because they were taking all the profits out of West End to try to keep this shoe business going.
So weird.
And so they had missed many.
The look on Chase.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's bizarre.
Yeah. It's right to this day.
I know it looks like we're right next to one another, but I'm looking at Jason, then I look up and Jason's like, what the fuck? All the shit I've ever heard. This is how they fucking. It's like Booger and Charles Dawson and Dawson in Better Off Dead. So they took the money from West Ends and put it into their shoes.
Italian shoes, man.
Right.
I told them not to do it.
Yeah, it's funny because and I always get worried because a lot of the stories I have, they sound ridiculous, and I'm like, I swear to God, it's like, who the hell's this guy? He's making this stuff. No, I swear to God, this is real stuff. But yeah,
it's so odd. It has to be true. No, like Vankman would say, no normal fan would ever make this up.
Yeah,
No.
Yeah. So my best friend is Ben Affleck. So West End wasn't making the royalty payments to Lucasfilm. And they were behind on payments. And the relationship was strong enough that Lucasfilm was kind of like, don't worry about it kind of thing. But it wasn't until the lawyers came in and were kind of like, hey, if you don't collect this money now, you're not going to have any kind of legal standing to collect it. So that was my understanding, is that basically when the license got pulled from them, Lucasfilm lawyers basically said, you can't keep giving these sweetheart deals because you're going to null and void your contract with them, and you're just going to be SOL. So that was the final straw. But I had heard that they had a really good work relationship with Applause, and they pretty much gave them a sweetheart deal and said, hey, we're gonna not charge you as much as we do some other people because we like what you do.
They were very loyal to their licensors. I mean, if you look at the time in 95, 96, the license for the comics was up at Dark Horse. And so everyone and their mother pitched, and Wildstorm over at Image made the biggest push. They had Travis Charest, they had everyone put together all this material, which ended up in a top set, whatever, how that worked out. But they got all the Star Wars material to get that license, and they had the numbers. They had a far bigger audience. They had all the cachet in the 90s, and Lucas was like, we'll stick with Dark Horse. We got it. And so I don't think it was the best move, although that move did give me Carlos Meglia's Star Wars Underworld. But I keep thinking Carlos Meglia ended up working at Wildstorm anyway. Maybe he would have done it. But we would have probably gotten a Travis, Charest fucking Star Wars series out of Wildstorm had that not happened. So, but they were very loyal.
Yeah. My favorite story about them is when the medical industry created the quote lightsaber, and then they had to sue them to protect their lightsaber copyright, but then paid them the money back. They gave them the money back for suing them, but they had to do it for the roundabout of, we will sue your ass if you take lightsaber protection. Yeah.
There was a guy who was an artist actually that wanted to freelance for West End, and he actually has his artwork on a couple of their covers. He submitted artwork to West End, had to freelance for it. He was in Hungary, and he's like, and I did the cover for these Star Wars books in Hungary, and so they're like, oh, easy process. This guy's already worked for Lucasfilm, so we'll send in the artwork and it'll go through the approval process, no problem. And so they did, and Lucasfilm said, what Star Wars books in Hungary? So it turns out that those were bootlegs, and somebody was publishing. So apparently what I was told is that the next day, some lawyers showed up in Hungary and were knocking on these guys' doors. And you hear copyright infringements like the Verve Pipe, if you remember them. They did that sampling of a Rolling Stones song, and I guess the Rolling Stones lawyers came in and said, all your money, we want it. And so just hand it over. Lucasfilm's lawyers pretty much came in and said, we want our royalties, and we want you to stop publishing these, but we're not going to they could have just taken it to the cleaners and sued them, until oblivion. But they were humane about it and basically just said, give us our cut, stop doing it, and then we'll call it a day. So they weren't, so they always came across as a company that was, very easy to work with. They're obviously very protective of their IP, but who isn't? But at the same time, they let a 16-year-old kid like me start to write for them. So Disney wouldn't do that. No other place is doing that now.
They will soon when they can't.
Like that. David Fincher was like that too, wasn't he? Like young David Fincher, wasn't he just going up to Lucasfilm and being like, I want to work on movies, and they're like, yeah, we'll do stuff. And he's doing stuff for Lucasfilm back in the day.
Yeah, I think the best story is James Cameron, we talked about, because he worked for Roger Corman, and he said there was a vacant office in the offices there, and so he decided to put his name on the door and give himself a title. And he was just like, they're like, oh, that's James Cameron's office. He's the director of so and so. It's like, damn.
That's literally what it takes. It takes that kind of
it's funny because I haven't done much. I haven't done anything really since the West End days in terms of Star Wars or anything like that. My career's gone in a completely different direction. But a lot of that is because back in those days when I was 16 and young and naive, I would be dumb enough to go up and be like, hey, can I write for you? And 26-year-old me would have been like, oh, you don't do that. You don't just walk up to people and say, hey, can I do this? Can I do that? But yeah, you do. And so it took me a while to realize, no, I had it right the first time. You should just be able to, go up there and say, hey, I really dig what you do, and how can I be a part of that?
Yeah.
Well, in any creative endeavor, you would like to think, that talent and personality make a bigger difference rather than lineage. Who was your father? This isn't Dune. Right? It doesn't matter who your lineage is. Anyone should be able to.
It
I know, I just pissed off a third of our audience.
Well, and I rag on J.J. Abrams a lot, and
everyone
when he
does.
first, when he first got announced for Force Awakens, I told everybody was like, oh, hey, and I was like, nah. And his parents were execs at ABC, and that's how he got his start. He never went to film school,
but now Matt Reeves. Right?
Right.
They had to do that film thing with Stevie Spielberg's films for Kathleen Kennedy. Yeah. One got to get the credit for Cloverfield, and the other one did the work. So that's how that friendship worked out.
Right? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So
the West End game saw its demise due to a shoe store. God, I fucking love it.
And it was 97, 98. It was just before Phantom Menace was ready to hit.
Right.
Because I remember actually the movie trilogy source book, I believe, was their highest publication of any book, which was actually funny because that was supposed to be the Jedi source book that was canceled. And I talked to you about that. That was kind of like Lucasfilm kind of said, yeah, you can, no, you can't. And that was canceled. And so at the last second, someone had to write that to fill a slot. And
we were really bummed there was no Phantom Menace module, source book or anything
and what's interesting too, because actually in the early stages, when they were first talking to Bantam about doing novels, Lucasfilm had actually approached Bantam about doing the role-playing game too. Because of course West End at that time, they're a small time company. I find this hilarious. They actually went, because of course they started like 87. It was like the 10-year anniversary of A New Hope, and so they were trying to get higher visibility in the market. So they went to Toys R Us, who carried D&D books and stuff like that, and said, "Hey, we got these Star Wars books. Would you like to carry them in your stores?" And the response they got from Toys R Us at the time was, "Star Wars is a dead license." So, they're eating those words a few years later.
Right.
But, so, at that time, no one thought anything of it. So when Lucasfilm approached Bantam about doing the novels, they said, "Oh, and do you want to take over this role-playing publication stuff too?" And they basically proposed something where Bantam would handle the West End stuff. And Bantam thought, the Star Wars novels are going to do okay. It's going to be like Star Trek. We'll sell, a couple here and there.
Hey.
And they were just kind of like, so they didn't think 2 seconds about even entertaining that notion. But at the same time, West End kind of had to like sit and wait for them to thumbs up or thumbs down. And they said, well, they can pull the license from us and do basically whatever they want because it's their IP. But we own the D6 system that the role-playing game is based on. That is our creation. But they also said that if they wanted to steal it and take it somewhere else, that they weren't in a position to fight Lucasfilm over the rights of it. And so it would just be like, guess it's theirs now. And obviously that never happened. But there is
I'm of two minds on that because I love the D6 system. But the problem I had with like my buddy, who was my other cohort and setting up modules and campaigns, is he would give like fucking characters 36D lightsaber comment. So they got this fucking giant mound of fucking dice, and just boggle the whole fucking board. It's like even 12D lightsaber. You have to get 12 of these fucking things and roll them. So it is like it works when you limit. When you limit power levels, and it's nice because you didn't have to go into a game town or find one of these places that were selling dice for $1 billion fucking dollars. You could play with anything.
But was that just your buddy who sucked, or did the actual game have that?
Vader had 12D. Like so 12 or 17D lightsaber because I remember I was like, well, how can your character have 36 fucking D if fucking Vader has fucking like 12?
If it's God, now I'm like just like racking my brain. I think the highest anybody had was like, I think in one of the Force abilities, the Emperor had like 15D.
Yeah.
But the whole philosophy, behind the D6 system was that they were trying to cater to people that had never played a role-playing game, and so their thought was, okay, you do Star Wars. You get people that maybe like Star Wars but have no idea what a role-playing game is. And you don't want to have to say, okay, you're in some, Podunk, Nebraska. Good luck finding your D8s and your D3s and all the other dice that you need for D&D. Just use your Monopoly dice and you can play.
Yeah.
It was a dumbed down game. It was very kind of, very basic. And it's funny because that's actually the biggest pushback they got, I think, in the feedback. Because if you read the original edition, some of the rules are very hokey and schlocky. And the whole idea was that it was supposed to be not just like kind of like it was basically the equivalent of how Star Wars is not science fiction. This was not supposed to be something that was going to be like, oh, it doesn't make any sense that, blah, blah, blah. It was very kind of pulpy.
But it worked because when you get to the TCG Star Wars game where it was the most over complicated fucking rule set in the history, man. I worked at Playco Toys and I got the box. And I'm like, my whole job is to explain this game to people. I don't fucking know what any of this shit means. And it had all these tiny icons, and you had to have like a fucking decoder to figure out the way these icons or this means you can hack into a system. I'm like, this is fucking dumb. Why is it just not simple like Magic? Like you got a base fucking set of rules and then the cards alternate. Like what happened? And so I always think like plus we can't forget that the Satanic Panic in the 80s was crazy. So like having a game that looked just like Dungeons and Dragons with the same dice did not help, like the kids.
Or did it? Like if you wanted to play role-playing games and your mom wasn't cool with that red demon on the cover of the D&D book, maybe she was okay with Luke Skywalker.
That's what I'm saying. Like if you had the 20D, if it looked like Dungeons and Dragons, even the dice, that wouldn't have helped your case. So
Yeah.
if you were like, Mom, can I borrow your AC Doocy fucking your backgammon dice? Oh, sure. Want to play backgammon?
I love backgammon, by the way. Don't talk shit.
I'm not at liberty. I'm not at
This is
liberty
the
to
one
talk
time
about
Jason throws the gauntlet down, motherfucker.
across the line.
Golden Girls and backgammon is my fucking jam. Shut up.
Facts.
I'm not at liberty to talk about the cult I had to join in order to write for the role playing game. You had to take a blood oath and there's sacrifices involved.
Is it the RPG version of Scientology? Right? they Star Wars LARP, right?
Yeah.
You got to start out at a Jawa level and you work your way up.
Here's a real esoteric. There was a God, was it Tom Hanks that was in it was a D&D movie from the 80s, and it was like wholesale. Yes,
TV movie.
Yeah,
anybody knows
family or something. I remember that.
Yeah, good times. Yeah.
I kind of there's aspects of the Satanic Panic that I do miss, because that was pretty badass when you're like when the Gate came out, that movie The Gate, that might happen if you play D&D or listen to Judas Priest.
You might end up like Steven Dorff.
Yeah, and then once we got past that, we're like, oh, metal's just kind of lame. Overall, metal's kind of boring sometimes. Really, no devils really show up or anything. Oh, okay. It was good marketing in a way.
Right. Yeah. After Ozzy got his own show, you're like, you thought this guy was the Prince of Darkness?
Yeah, this guy's just like
very
your
disappointing.
Peed on the Alamo and got arrested. So,
do you have any? If you don't, just say no. But do you have any stories of the Shadows of the Empire, time at West Ends? Because I'm always interested in that, marketing for the movie that's not a movie. Yeah.
Well, I know that they did go to Lucas for hey, we're planning on doing a story, blah blah blah. And his only advice that I was told that he gave them was, they need to be like a serious crime syndicate. They can't be like Keystone Cops. So if you're going to have Shizor and Black Sun, they had to seem legit, not just it can be like Cy Noodles and Max Rebo, as your crime boss.
We can't have Shizor running around at 48 frames per second. It looks fucking ridiculous. This isn't a Peter Jackson movie here. All right.
Yeah, but because I was around that whole time when they were doing that stuff, and West End was kind of always, in a lot of ways, the central hub for anybody doing anything, because the authors certainly talk about how they would get a stack of West End books in the mail saying, "Here, read this stuff," and they stole stuff directly out. Well, not stole, but generously borrowed from their material to put in their novels, so they were kind of the go-to in terms of continuity, because they were considered, because heck, even the guys at Lucasfilm were like, I don't know, talk to this guy.
Because they were the ones writing guides essentially, so it makes sense.
And even there's a lot of stuff, and it's been so long. I did talk to Steve Perry at one point. I had conversations with him back in the day, who wrote Shadows of the Empire. But I couldn't tell you any specific stories about anything that he relayed to me in terms of that that are already known and already out there. Nothing behind the scenes. The only thing that I heard was that Lucas was like, they've got to be a real threat as a crime syndicate. Yeah.
Steve Perry's like, they wanted Kevin Costner to be Dash Rendar, and I wanted Nick Cage. I was Nick Cage is going to bring something to this saga that fucking Kevin Costner won't.
They're like, Steve Perry, this isn't a real movie, man. Why do you keep talking about that?
But then I saw Tin Cup, and I'm like, they were right. They were right. It's not a movie. It's a movie in my head. I played the game. It exists. Listen to the soundtrack.
To jump back to the actor stuff. I met Anthony Daniels, or one of the times I met Anthony Daniels was at Celebration 1, and my best friend was smoking a cigarette, having a cigarette break, and he saw us from really far away, and he came all the way out because he saw two teenagers smoking. I wasn't smoking actually, but he was, and chastised us, but not in a bad way. but chastised the hell out of him. He still smokes today. It didn't work, by the way. But I never started smoking for what it's worth, so I guess maybe it kind of did. But
do you want to grow up to be like producer Rick McCollum? Huh? Change first it's this, then it's Coke, then it's crypto. It never ends.
But no, David Prowse had come out to talk to him. If it had been David Prowse to come talk to him, he might have quit.
Yeah, David Prowse would have just beat the shit out of him. It's like, now you're on a ventilator trying to smoke.
He's like, you like Star Wars?
Yeah. Did you ever meet Carrie? You said you met Carrie Fisher?
Yeah, Carrie was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a trip. It's funny because, there's certain people that, like I know because I can be obnoxious in public too. And so, you're not always everybody's cup of tea. And Carrie
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Exactly what I'm saying. So, Carrie was definitely that type of, very gregarious, outgoing. And if you weren't ready for that and you didn't know what you're getting yourself into, some people were like, what just happened?
Yeah.
I know one time some guy was getting an autograph from her and she glitter bombed him. And he just walked away. She did. She had like a big thing of glitter sitting next to her. She was just like, here
the
you go.
missed opportunity is putting her and Benicio in the same fucking scene together. See, that's the thing about The Last Jedi. I'm like, you got these two. He would have brought the Carrie out that you really want to see on screen.
Yeah. But she would. It's funny because she doesn't take anything serious. And I remember the first time we were waiting for her to come in back and sign autographs. And we had a scheduled time, and she's showing up at this point in time. And I even actually it was down in Orlando. The 2012 convention down in Orlando. Okay. And I actually did her plans with a friend who lived down in Orlando. And I'm like, oh, we should be done in no time. Then it's like 45 minutes later, like, where's Carrie? And she shows up and she walks in and she has Gary, who's, I guess he's in the Last Jedi somewhere. Yeah. So Gary comes in with his Darth Vader toy and she's like, is the hall closed? And we're like, well, yeah, it's been closed for a while. She's like, okay, I'm going to go steal some stuff. And she walked off. And we're like, is she serious? Do we call security on Carrie Fisher?
I owe you, George Lucas. I just left that on everything.
Yeah. But then, I mean, she's super fun, super friendly. She's hilarious. And the one celebration, we always had a hard time like pegging her down to like say, okay, you got to be here at this time to sign. We got all this stuff. We need to be done by this day. And the one time she, unfortunately, I missed out because I wasn't there. But a couple of people I know, they were asking her, hey, when can we get you to sign this stuff? And she's like, well, can't you just bring it up to my hotel room? And they were like, did we just get invited to Carrie Fisher's hotel room? Yeah, so they brought everything up to her, and she signed it up there, and they got pictures of her in the hotel room. I'm like, man, of all the days that I decided to go out and have fun in LA, I missed out on that. But she would sign stuff. Like the one time she signed somebody's poster, "Blow Me Forcefully," and I mean, it's funny because the guy, that's. The part of fandom that I hate is the people that take this shit way too serious. Yeah. And unfortunately, the guy that she put on the poster on was one of those guys that take shit way too serious. And
that's
so
great.
He saw it.
That makes it even better. That makes it even better.
Yeah. No, it got an even better story because then this guy was like, what the hell, man? And there was a guy staying in the building right next to him. He's like, I will pay you like $200 to have that poster right now. Because he was like, I want that on mine. But yeah, she would just randomly put you never knew what she would put on there. It just depended on her mood and what she would throw on any poster. Yeah. And it's funny because Warwick Davis and Val Kilmer are like that too. They'll actually write messages to each other back and forth. So if someone has like a Willow photo and Val Kilmer will sign, like, are you getting Warwick Davis to sign it? And he'll put something on there. It's like, he'll put like actual size and put an arrow to Warwick Davis on there.
You die in the sequel. Sorry,
Yeah. So they trash talk each other across signature. Right. It's hilarious. But yeah, Carrie was always awesome. Awesome person to work with. She's super hilarious.
Yeah.
Definitely the standout person to work with. I mean, everybody that I met luckily was great. But like I said, some people you could tell just enjoyed being there and loved being there. Yeah, you could definitely tell.
It's kind of funny, like what you're saying. I mean, not that it's not necessarily like kind of obvious in a way, but when they were making The Last Jedi, I would get like a lot of like, oh, here's some dirty stuff, man. Here's some stuff that like about her and things like that, and it was that she was partying, and then but then they like one of the like there was like a big blow up between her and Oscar Isaac, where she just disappears for like 4 hours, and he needs to fly back to LA to work on an indie movie that doesn't have the time to sit around waiting for Oscar Isaac to show up. And she shows up and she blows the takes a bunch of times. He gets his right, and I guess he just like walks off. And it was like they so like their personalities though did not like meet up a lot of the time with her shit like that.
Yeah,
so you can see how like that's frustrating, but also what makes her rad at the same time.
It's like, well, you're in LA, Shaq and Kobe. I think that's kind of the same thing, is that Shaq liked to have fun and Kobe was all business, and you put those two people in a room and yeah, those two personality types don't get along. Yeah. So I can see that. I can see we're definitely, if you're very uptight and very serious, she's not going to,
when I see you at a convention one of these days, I'm going to bring you a shirt that has Poe and Leia, and it's going to say Shaq and Kobe.
I was going to say blow me forcefully. You know what I mean?
Shaq and Kobe, blow me forcefully. Yeah, that's a great shirt.
There you go. Yes.
Well, I want to watch Lucasfilm take that one off T Public. You guys.
That means it's canon.
It's canon now.
You get the DMCA, that means it's legit.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And yeah, I'm like your history with Star Wars is completely fascinating. Like it's so
Thanks.
Yeah, it's rad. I mean, in so many ways, because it's just like ultimate fan kind of like experience, like what you kind of laid out here.
Right,
It just is awesome,
Yeah.
Because it's like when you, and not to say you didn't work on something, but like when you have somebody who, like, I talked to like a crew member who worked on like every day on Force Awakens, and I'm just like talking to, they're just like, yeah, like it's like mundane. It becomes very not special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but it's like there's this weird proximity between things where things remain completely special and then not anymore. And it seems like you're like in that on that magic line. If that makes sense. At least that's what it sounds like.
Well, you never know, man. Had they kept that shoe store going, James might be all burnt out by now. I'm like fucking. Oh, and then we got to the whole Ewok modules and the droids modules, because they just fucking had nothing to do, and the Dirge module.
It was the Gungans versus Ewoks campaign that broke James. That's
right. Yeah.
Well, that's where he just couldn't take it anymore. But yeah, so anyways, thanks for coming on today, dude. I appreciate it.
Oh, man, thanks for the invite.
Yeah, we're at about time right now, and I'm curious to see what else goes on with the Andy Serkis stuff for anybody who's still watching, because I got some, that it sounds like he's in it, you guys. It sounds like Andy Serkis is in Cassian. So if there's anything else happens or anything else big, I'll jump back on a stream and see if Rob's not busy. And if nothing else big happens, we'll see you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And yeah, that's it, I guess. Thanks, James. See you tomorrow, Rob.
Thanks, James.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
It's not about spaceships.
Making Star Wars Show. Making Star Wars Show. Making Star Wars Show. Making Star Wars Show.
It's not about spaceships.
All right. Sometimes it gives us like a minute of video after. You never know what it's going to do.